Good to see everybody. Good to see everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. Let me make Matt the co-host, and we're recording tonight. Hello, Bernie. How are you?
I am fine. A little tired, but fine.
Yes, good. Good to see you. Yes, and good to see Karina and Alex and Gary, everybody. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming. We'll wait
Yeah,
another.
I'll have to turn off my audio. There are lots of sirens in Baltimore today.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then be safe in your car. Okay. I found a solution to a problem I've been having with my computer, I think, and that is my hard drive on my computer was almost full. So it was starting up real slow. All kinds of things were happening over the weekend. And I just started thinking about it and realized and said, well, let me check how full the hard drive is. And sure enough, I mean, it was redlining. And so I just dumped a lot of stuff onto my hard drive, my portable hard drive, and it freed up a lot of space. And now things are working much quicker.
Oh, that's great, man.
So,
I mean, I know I know that's a solution, but I wouldn't have thought of it.
well, it's kind of like the cream that comes to the top of the milk when you pour the milk,
Right.
you know, all of a sudden those good ideas rise up.
Exactamente.
Yes. Hello, Zara. How are you? Are you exercising again? Are you walking?
I'm walking to my car right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So funny. You're so good at is her head moving slightly?
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you today, but I didn't want to disturb you, so I didn't, figuring that you were still getting yourself back into a routine.
You're very, very insightful. I was definitely a little overwhelmed with coming back into the shock of the real world.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we need to do opening prayers tonight. So, Matt, are you up for the opening prayers tonight, or shall we have someone else do it?
We could have someone else do tonight, and I could take next time, maybe. I'm
All
trying
right,
to.
that's fine. Karina, how about you? Would you like to recite the opening prayers?
Not very much.
Okay,
Not today.
okay.
Next.
Next. Okay, well, Gary did them last time. So, Bernie, how about you? Would you do them, please?
I don't have the last one, the Cigari Monte.
Jesus.
So
All right, well, it's not, oh, you don't have that. Okay, well, then, that's fine. We can manage without
I'll
that.
do the rest.
You do the rest, and how about that? I'll do the Cigari Mate at the end.
Let me see, where's my book? Okay. So the usual in Tibetan and English. So,
Please, in whatever way you wish to do it.
oh my, you're leaving up to me. That might be a mistake, but we'll see.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Marco, will you mute your microphone, please?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly will I establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly will I establish him in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dangla Dongwar Pe J Pedra no par J Pe Geg Tarpa Dam Tam Che Ken Pe Bardu Cho Par J Pa Tam Che Kiso J Pe Mananka Danya Pe Sem Chen Tam Che De Wa Dang Den Dug Nya Dang Drel Nyur Du La Na Me Pa Yang Dak Par Zog Pe Jang Chup Rinpo Che To Ba Ja. So, thus until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. De che du sanga ke par du che luna ki sum ge war la ko. Ma she bar du luna ki sum ge wa la ko. Du de ring ne sum me ni ma sang da sangi bar du luna ki sum ge wa la ko. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sangha. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Drenchen sawa dang yu parche pe balden lama dampa nam la kapsu chio. Yedam kyo kogi la sok nam la kapsu chio. Sangye chom dende nam la kapsu chio. Dampe cho nam la kapsu chio. Pak pe gundun nam la kapsu chio. Pawo kandro chokyong sung me sok ye sheki kendang dempa nam la kapsu chio. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhists embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhists embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Jiangchu Ningpo Chi Ki Bar Sangye Namla Kyab Su Chi Chodang Jiangchu Senpai Soglang Deshin Kyab Su Chi Jitar Nangi Deshe Ki Jiangchu Tugni Ke Padang Jiangchu Senpe La Pala De Da Quinshin Ne Patar De Jendro La Pendandu Jiangchu Semni Ke Gizing De Jenduni La Pala Rinpa Jendu La Pargi. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chognam La Jiangchu Pardu Dagni Kyausu Chi Dagi Jinsogi Pe Sonam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Dropar Sho. Let's see. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manang kadanya pesam chen tamche dewa dangi wei dun pardang pargyor ching. Dognao dang dugnao gi gyudang drum wargyor ching. Dognao me pe dewa dang mi dra wargyor ching. Nering chak dani dang dra wei dang yom la ne pargyor ching. Let's see. Next is the 100-syllable mantra, right? Or do we do the 7th prayer next?
100-syllable mantra, please.
100-syllable mantra. Okay. So the English translation first. Om Vajrasattva Samaya, help to protect my vow to purify myself. May you remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me, be loving towards me. Grant me the attainments beyond to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind, heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the bliss of the four joys, O Blessed One, who embodies the essence within me. Do not abandon me. Grant me the realization of the indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus I signify my unity with non-duality. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Tishta Drido Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Supokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Mem Prayatsa Sarva Karma Sutsa Me Sitsam Shriyam Kuruham Ahahaho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Bajre Mame Munsa Bajri Baba Mahasamaya Sattva Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Tishta Drido Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Supokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Mem Prayatsa Sarva Karma Sutsa Me Sitsam Shriyam Kuruhom Ahahaho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Bajre Mame Munsa Bajri Mahas Samaya Sattva. Okay, I guess it's yours now, Lance.
Thank you very much, Bernie. So we go to page 12 and do the Sagari Mati requested sutra. Likewise be extinguished. Extinguish all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are in me, please be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food and drink peacefully and enjoy it, and be satisfied so that all obstacles may be destroyed. Be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the Maras be purified. As a result, may all the Maras be defeated. Very good. Thank you. So now we will go and I'll screen share the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. So if you have your text handy to be able to follow that will be great. Just cleaning up my screen a little bit. So, precious human life. The freedoms and advantages so extremely difficult to obtain accomplish the purpose of human life. If one does not achieve benefit from this now, how could this opportunity come again? Oh, this kind of leisure and endowment is supremely difficult to obtain. When one obtains a body which is easily lost, do not waste it meaninglessly, but rather use it to attain ultimate liberation, joyous result. Please contemplate on precious human life. You can read this quietly to yourself or reflect on the meaning to yourself, how you experienced this in the last few days or whatever. Contemplate precious human life. Okay. The next is impermanence. Ka. No matter what has been done, nothing benefits at the time of death. Worldly activities, yes, they are lies. Ka. The 8 worldly dharmas are like a painted rainbow. Think you can put your trust in them? In the certainty of death, and knowing that nothing remains long, quickly accomplish liberation. Impermanence makes departure certain, like the shadow of the setting sun. Abandoning laziness and indifference, blaze like fire in fierce diligence. This life is impermanent, like clouds in the autumn sky. Birth and death migrators are the same as actors in a play or a dance. The life of beings is like lightning in the sky, like water falling from a steep mountain cliff. It departs quickly, quickly. The nature of all phenomena is impermanence. Death is a certainty to all who are born. Death can descend any time like a drop of morning dew on a blade of grass. Quick, it is time to make effort for the essence of the Dharma. Contemplate on impermanence. Okay. Next is the suffering of samsara. Consider the suffering of beings in the 6 realms of samsara. Doing so, great fear and dread arise in the heart. In the 3 lower realms, and even in the 3 higher ones, there is not an instant of absolute happiness. I will avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence and practice the excellent path of peace to enlightenment. Contemplate the meaning of the suffering of samsara. Okay. The last is karma, cause, and result. Even if one were a king at the time of one's death, one's possessions, enjoyments, friends, and retinue will not follow. But wherever that sentient being goes, his karma follows after him like a shadow. The fruit of one's positive karma is happiness. Suffering is the fruit of negative karma. The inexorable karmic causation is the mode of abiding in all dharmas. Henceforth, practice the dharma by distinguishing what should be practiced and what should be given up. Contemplate the meaning of karma, cause, and result. Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, Lance,
Yes,
I have a question.
yes, sir.
If we all suffer, right?
Yes,
Which means that we have negative karma someplace along the line or in 100 places along the line.
okay.
What are we to do about that? Or that is, oh,
You just muted your microphone.
okay. I'm
So
a little
what are we
confused.
going to do about that is what you last said.
Yeah, because I mean, we're here in human bodies, which is the greatest accomplishment of all, more or less. And yet we have had bad karma along the way, and here we are. So it is a dichotomy of sorts, isn't it?
Well, this is what we've been learning about these past couple of weeks, talking about karma, cause and result. So the first thing that we look at is the 10 non-virtues and the 10 non-virtues.
Yes.
So if the suffering is resulting from karma, then somewhere along the line, very closely to what we're experiencing is going to be tied to those 10 non-virtues. So for us to be able to overcome them, we need to practice the 10 virtues.
Oh, I see.
It's really that simple, and
Okay.
becoming mindful of that.
Yeah.
What we're doing is developing mindfulness about all what's happening to us as human beings.
Okay. I need to go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have your book, the Jewel Ornament Liberation book?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so on that page then are listed the 10 non-virtues and the 10 virtues. And so you should
Oh,
maybe,
we haven't gotten there yet, though.
well, we did. We spoke about them last
Oh,
week.
that's right. Yes, last week. And we're going to continue with chapter 6 tonight, yes?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Correct. So we've got the guides. We've got information to help us do it. Now we need to apply it.
Okay. I want to proceed without holding up everyone else with my dumb questions.
Well, it's not a dumb question, but we just need to be reminded that we've already got a lot of the information we need. Now it's a matter of being able to digest it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question, and you're always welcome to come in and say something and ask a question.
Thank you. I'll try not to be entirely ridiculous.
It's all right. Does anybody else have any questions or comments that you would like to talk about in regard to the karma, cause, and result, or anything of the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma?
Lance,
Yes, sir.
Karma is at least a part of what has brought us together, isn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
We've had many types of karma. I can think in,
yeah, there's virtuous karma and there's negative karma.
I can think in my life, that I'm really fortunate to be here.
Yes.
I've survived a lot of mistakes, but the important thing is that we're here together today and talking about these things. And whatever we've been through and whatever mistakes we've made, we've endured that to arrive at this destination. And to me, that's what's most important. I can't forget some of the things that I've done, but I can't dwell on them. I can be here now.
Right.
Mhm.
So a lot of this is just in this life that we're living now. Some of it is what happened last week or last month or 5 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever. But some of it may be, part of our human existence because we share, this human existence. We share this mind. We share this physical body and this intellect. All the elements are all within us, all together. So there is a transpersonal aspect to this. We may not be able to trace and point to every one of our lifetimes, but we can look back and we can just allow ourselves to imagine what it was to be a human being or being an animal or being an insect in prior lives. And through that, we can experience quite a bit. And that may give us the ability to be able to go deeper in our meditation. And maybe we have the ability to trace past lives. Maybe you have an affinity for a certain thing, in your life. I've always had an affinity for the deer. I've always had affinity for people that were in war. So there's certain things that that just seem very real to me. There's an affinity I had to the South American Indians before the Spanish came, and the rights that they went through, the things that they went through, and so it may be true, it may be not true. I don't know, but we can allow ourselves to imagine these things. So this is part of the process of contemplation and so on. So thank you for that comment. Okay, does anybody else have a comment? So where we left off last week, we had been talking about what meditative concentration is. And I was explaining to you the 4 absorptions and the 4 formlessnesses, not so much as a teaching to explain all the various details and so on of these, but just to familiarize, to acquaint you with these 8 levels of meditative concentration. So what we are suggesting that we get into by developing a personal practice is the very, very basic element of developing that meditative concentration. So to repeat myself, we start off with the opening prayers to set our motivation. Then we recite the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, furthering our motivation. Then we begin to ask the questions of what, why, and how. And then we go through the stages of meditation of bodhicitta, of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And we examine what they are. And we've talked about that in the past, and I've given you a guide sheet to help you to remember that. And we'll invariably go over that sometime in the future. Maybe you can dig it out of your notes, but if you would like to talk about it sometime, we can do that. We can have a private conversation and talk about the stages of meditation, of bodhicitta, and how we develop that. And then that is all bodhicitta. We examine what bodhicitta is, the holy enlightened mind. And then we enter into what we call shamatha, calm abiding meditation, calm abiding, just resting. So we haven't gone to a lot of detail with that yet. We're not quite ready for that. And then after that comes vipassana meditation, which is insight meditation. We're not quite ready for that, although we can have moments of calm abiding meditation, of resting meditation, peaceful meditation. And that's a good thing, so we get glimpses of that. We get glimpses of the vipassana. We get glimpses of the insights of things that come up in our mind from our heart center. We can really sense that it's coming up from our big mind, from our spiritual mind. And maybe it has to do with processing some of the things we've talked about in these sessions, but it's a coming together, and it may interrupt our calm abiding meditation, but that's okay. It shows that we are resting, and it shows that wisdom that is within ourselves is coming up. So that's very good. And then there's a few other stages after that are characterized by this meditative concentration that we talked about last time, the 4 absorptions and the 4 formlessnesses. So they are not identified here in this text, but I did speak to you about them, and maybe you took notes. And if you'd like to go over them again, we can do that at some point. I would like to take it one step further right now and just talk about this meditative concentration. And the Buddha said Do not mistake understanding for realization. And do not mistake realization for liberation. Milarepa said, do not entertain hopes for realization, but practice all your life. So what this means is that we're on this progression of this pathway, and we go through these epiphanies. We have these glimpses and so on. These glimpses become broader for us and deeper for us and so on. And we begin to relate it more to our everyday experiences, to our everyday lives. We begin to understand more about our spirituality. And we begin to make some connection points of realization, some light bulbs, figuratively going off in our heads and in our hearts. Something opens up and a doorway of love and compassion opens up that we didn't know that we had. So this is from engaging in these practices, engaging in these studies and so on. So these realizations that we have, there's many of those, and we shouldn't mistake those for liberation. Liberation is something we will recognize, and we can have moments of that. We can have sense of freedom of that. We can have a sense of liberation. So even though we may not be stable in that, we still can experience it just like the click of a finger. And then immediately, as quick as that click of the finger occurred, we go back to our normal way of thinking, our way of conduct, and so on. But in that click of a finger was like a very strong understanding of what it is to be free, what it is to be liberated. And with that comes bliss, with that comes happiness, and so on like that. And that's all from being able to work with the virtues and the non-virtues. That happens at the lower level. And then we get to this higher level. So this is what the Buddha was teaching us. This is what Milarepa was saying. Do not entertain hopes for realization, but practice all your life. So we've said before that what we're learning is helping us to change our lifestyle. We are incorporating this, we are assimilating this into our lifestyle. And where we would spend so much time waking up in the day and doing a certain routine and so on, and then going through our day, making meals, going places, going to work, and then at the end of the day, we would have our routine of doing the things that we do, reading books or watching television or listening to the radio, whatever it is that we do. That's our lifestyle. That's our routine. That's the surroundings in which we live and so on. But with the Dharma, we're changing our lifestyle to include the Dharma. Some things in our lifestyle, we will have to move away to make room for the Dharma because of the time constraints. But we'll make decisions based on, well, maybe I really don't need to be spending all this time doing these things that I've been doing, which have done nothing but just confuse me or just numb me out. So maybe I need to spend more time developing my understanding of the Dharma. Maybe that's more beneficial to me and also to other beings. So this is the lifestyle, bringing that into the lifestyle. And we practice that. We develop our practice, our lifestyle practice for the rest of our lives. It doesn't stop when we're 60 years old, or it doesn't stop when we're 65 or 70 or whatever. That we want to be able to develop this so it becomes the lifestyle of our passing away into the next life, so to speak, into the bardo of reality, going through the death process and so on. And then if we come back into this life, that we come back into a lifestyle that is one that we have been developing in this lifetime. So does anybody have any question about that? I mean, that's quite a lot, really. When you think about just what I just said, that's quite a lot.
Oh, Lance, I just want to thank you for bringing this in context. Like, I will keep puzzling myself about like what is enlightenment, what is realization, what is full liberation, and I think today you kind of crystallized that for me.
Well, terrific. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much. I rejoice at your light bulb going off, that insight that you had, that realization, that connection point. Because I know you've been a student of the Dharma for a long time, and we all are having, greater refinement, greater purification of the things that we think about in our minds, the things that are active in our lifetime, and it makes way for the Dharma.
Yeah, and I really like the quote that you mentioned about uh, practicing, like not hoping for enlightenment, but just practicing. I
Yes,
think that's a really nice one.
yes. We can say something like this. People can say to us, well, how do you know this? How do you know all this? How do you know this is true? And we might come to a point in our conversation where we say, well, I really don't know. Nobody's, I haven't had this message come to me. I haven't had this powerful hand, this spiritual hand come to me or something like that. But in spite of that, it's still a good way to live. It's still good to be a virtuous person. It's still good to be able to treat other people with loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Maybe it doesn't go any further than this in this one lifetime. This is the only lifetime we have in this particular body, isn't it? So that by itself should be reason for us to continue this throughout the rest of our lives, to be developing that virtue, that wholesomeness. If it benefits other people, that's wonderful. We know that it can. If it helps us in the next life, well, that's great. But we may not know that for sure, but it doesn't matter, because all that we have to really worry about right now or think about or work for our conduct now is in this life. And then whatever life comes after that will take care of itself. We have to have faith in that. The Buddha taught that there are three mindfulnesses of the Buddha. Now, the Buddha is talking about not just himself personally, but what we call the Buddha mind, the Buddha, body, speech, and mind. When we say Buddha body, speech, and mind, that we are all aspiring to it. He reached that, and he was finding ways to be able to teach that to us, to show it to us, so that we could experience it ourselves. And so this was his gift. But we still have to follow the instructions to be able to recognize this all ourselves, to be able to see how it fits into our life and to our mindset. So there's three mindfulnesses, three mindfulnesses of the Buddha, of being the Buddha. And it's something that we can relate to now. It's something we can aspire to now. So the first one is that the Buddha has no attachment to those who listen to him respectfully. And I use the pronoun him, but it could be him or her. It would be better maybe not to use a gender pronoun, because we don't know, because we're all human beings. This is the fruition, this is the completion of being a human being, is being a Buddha, what we call a Buddha. Other traditions may call it the Christ, they may call it God, they may call it Yahweh, they may call it Krishna. There's all different kinds of names for this, but we refer to it as Buddha. So there's no attachment to those who are listening to me. I don't have any greater love, or the Buddha doesn't have any greater love or compassion or attention for anyone, whether they're listening to him or not. So the second one is he has no hatred towards those who do not listen respectfully. So if there's a group of people and some are very attentive, he has great love for them. He has great awareness. He has great mindfulness of them. But then there are some that are maybe causing some trouble, that are not being respectful, that are talking while he's talking, or people are trying to meditate and they're talking in their meditation or doing something disruptive or something. But the Buddha still has the same bodhicitta for them, still has no hatred for them. And then last, the third of the mindfulnesses is that he neither has attachment nor hatred, aversion, to those who listen to him with mixed feelings. So in other words, there's some that are going to love him and want to listen to everything that he says and try and absorb everything. There are going to be some that are going to talk back, that are going to hate him and not and say that he's doing the wrong thing and so on. And then there are some who are going to be dubious about it. They're going to be on one side or the other. Say, well, I don't know, it sounds really good, but I haven't experienced this. I don't know. And maybe it's possible. I've heard of people doing this. And the Buddha will have respect for them, will have neither attachment nor hatred towards them, will accept them for who they are. And then he'll constantly teach whatever he can for the benefit of all beings. So this mindfulness then should be something that we should be aware of ourselves. And you probably can relate these three mindfulnesses to situations that you've been in over your lifetime. That there were people that you really gravitated to, there were friends that were really good and you really cared for them. But then there was people who were very disruptive and so on, but you really deep down, you cared for them too. And then there was the people that just, were ambivalent about everything and you cared for them as well. So this is the three mindfulnesses of a Buddha. So these are things to help us see where we are, to see what our mindfulness has developed into. We need to remind ourselves of this from time to time. So if you write these things down, if you need me to send you, some paper that has these things, I can send it to you in paper. I can send it to an email, but it should be part of your notes. It should be part of, your study materials to be able to think about these things. Any comments or questions? Okay. So now going back to karma, cause, and result. So I'm using my outline book here that is from the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, and I'm on the next page. I'm not sure if it's page 10 or whatever, but it says Roman numeral 3, ascription. So what this means is, when we have karma, when we do actions, karma means actions. The causes of the actions are what we need to be able to recognize so that we can do the correct actions. So we need to pay attention to what the causes are before the actions take place so that we can modify those actions to be wholesome actions, to be not negative actions. So this ascription is assigning this karma. We do this karma, we do this action. Now, how does it work? How does it manifest? That there is this assignment to our being a human being. So this being a human being is broken down. You look here in this outline book, it's broken down into what we call the 5 skandhas. And the 5 skandhas, we've talked about this before, but it's been a while, and maybe some of you haven't heard this. The 5 skandhas are like the aggregates, the heaps of what it is to be a human being. One of those groups, one of those heaps is our very form, our body. The next is the sensations, the feelings that we have, both the feelings on our body, the feelings within ourselves and our heart and our mind, and so on. The sensations that we have, the sensations of the senses. You know, what our eyes see, what our ears hear, our nose smells, our tongue tastes, and our body touches. So that's part of being a human being. And so these assignments of the karma are affecting the form, affecting our feelings, our sensations. In addition, then that affects our perceptions, what it is that we are bringing together out of the forms and out of the sensations, and we're creating perceptions of where we are, what we're doing, and so on like this. So you might remember that when we were talking about this some time ago, I used the analogy that we're a newborn infant. And the newborn infant every couple of weeks is going through great changes, and it first begins to feel its body. It's always touching itself and doing, and then it's beginning to see things. It begins to recognize its mother and its father and brothers and sisters and its environment and so on. And it starts feeling heat and cold, and whether it's wet and whether it's hungry. All these things are all part of sensations and feelings. But then that infant begins to make perceptions out of what this is. So it begins to realize things like, well, if I start crying, because when I've cried when I was hungry, or when I cried when I was wet, or when I cried because I was hot or cold, very suddenly my mother, that being, would come to me and try and make me comfortable. So this is a perception that they begin to build on. Oh, if I do these things, if I feel these things, these other things will happen. And I begin to perceive that all this is for me. This is all for me. We start developing our selfishness. So this is part of being a human being. So then the next skandha is our mental formations. The way in which now we're putting these perceptions together. And so it's like taking an erector set, or it's like taking, building blocks or something like that, each of these different elements, and we can put them together and fashion some kind of a mental formation of what this is. So now I can just close my eyes and I can imagine all this coming together in some mental formation that I've created, that this all fits in. My family, my friends, the people that come around, the clothing that they put on me, all these things I began to identify with as my mental formation. And then the fifth of the skandhas, these aggregates, is the aggregate of consciousness. That we now have an awareness of all these things. We may not know where they come from, where they're going, and so on like that, but we have a consciousness of these things. And we begin to, now become more conscious of ourselves and what we can do in the midst of all of this. So it's to these 5 skandhas that the karma reacts with, connects with. The way it's said here in the book, in the Jewel Ornament Liberation, it says, ascription of karma, action, means that you experience the results of the karma you create. That you experience the results of the karma, of the actions that you create. The results will ripen in the skandhas related to the actor. So in other words, what I react to might be very different than what you react to, and what somebody else reacts to, and what yet someone else reacts to. The same, we have these same skandhas, we have these same heaps, and we have these same karmas, but we can react differently to them. Will ripen in the skandhas related to the actor and not to others. So what happens to me doesn't necessarily happen the same way to you. Likewise, what happens to you doesn't happen to me or anybody else. So these 5 skandhas can be thought of as the aggregates to our attachment. These are the building blocks of our attachments. I, me, mine, ego, who I am, my body, my feelings, my sensations, my perceptions, my mental formations, my consciousness. And so this becomes the truth of suffering. This is how we get to suffering in the very first beginning part, because we're attaching to this. We want this. And then maybe there'll come periods where we don't want some of these things. So we develop aversions. And then we develop jealousies. And then we develop greediness. And then all this is all steeped in the brew, the tea, if you will, of ignorance. So it's like a cup of tea. And all this is all within ourselves, just brewing into who we are. This is the truth of our suffering. So to understand our suffering at a very elemental level, fundamental level, means right now, right in this. And this is the power of what this is. Now you can ignore this, it's very fine. But there'll be a time when you'll have questions about, well, what is this suffering? Why do I have this suffering? What is the truth of suffering? We need to come back to this to help answer that. And we all have to answer it in our own way. We have to have that karmic ascription, because the karma of our action of study, the karma of our action of meditation, of contemplation, all these things, that's a karma too, you see. That's an action we take, and there'll be a result. So what do you want the result to be? So then it says at the bottom of this section here, it says, craving or desire to the skandhas, to this, what it is to be a human being, appears as heaps. Personality is another way of saying this. Characteristics of our being a human being, or the groups that we might fall into. So the groups that we fall into might be, those who are infants, the birth of a human being, the old age of a human being, the death of a human being, the sickness of human beings, the duration of being a human being, the changes of being a human being. So right now, this may seem a bit abstract to you, but it will mean much more to you if you're willing to take the time to contemplate this, to meditate on this, to allow yourself to have that out of body, so to speak, thoughtfulness, that experience of, well, what does this mean? And allow yourself to kind of go into this insightful contemplation. This is what the practice is part of. So this is the ascription of karma, that it's coming to us, it's being ascribed to our physical, intellectual body. So the next part is that there is a strict result. So what this means is, if I do good things, there's a strict result that good things are going to happen. If I do bad things, there's going to be a strict result that bad things are going to happen. They're going to result. If, on the other hand, I do good things, but then I corrupt them by doing bad things, there's going to be a bad result. And likewise, if there's a bad thing, a bad cause, but I'm able to transform that action, that karma, into with a good action, then I will have a good result. So we can see that we can make this happen, and that there is this strict result. So how do we do this? How do they know that? Did somebody come down from the mountain with tablets, and this was inscribed on the tablets? Or did somebody open up a fortune cookie and it was written in the fortune cookie and learn this, and then we began to practice this? Or did someone write it in a book or something like that? Or maybe was it observed? Maybe all this was observation of what it is to be a human being in this phenomenal world. And in speaking about that, is that any different than how gravity was discovered? Did somebody wake up one morning and say, oh, the reason why I'm not flying out of the bed or off the floor is because of gravity? Oh, dumb me. I wish I had thought of that before. But no, it was observed. It was observed that things have weight to them and things fall in different ways. And if you put something on a table, it's going to stay there. If you jump up, you're going to come back down. All these observations. And then they began to build a body of knowledge around this, a science around this, to say, oh, these are the properties of gravity. And here we can predict the way gravity is going to work. And not only can we do it in this world, but we can look out in the stars and the other places, and we can see that there's gravity at work there and so on. So without getting too far afield about that, the one thing about gravity that we can't recognize is it's invisible. We can see its results, but we can't see what it is itself. It's invisible, just like karma. Karma is invisible. Gravity is a physical science. Karma, cause and result, is a spiritual science. We can also look at electromagnetics, electricity. It's invisible. I can go up to what looks like a benign bare wire that's hanging out of a receptacle in the wall, AC power receptacle, and I touch that bare wire, and wow, I get that electric shock. We've all had that at one time or another. It's invisible, but once we touch it, we know it's there, and it's very powerful. Then there's also the physical law of what we call the strong force. The strong force is the force that holds atoms together. And the weak force is what's pulling it apart. So if the weak force became stronger than the strong force, then there would be a great big explosion, and energy is released. And that's going into the atomic dynamics and so on like that. But that's all invisible. But yet, the scientists can measure it. They know it's there because it's been observed. So we can see the karma through our observation. We know that when we do good things, we feel better. We feel better about ourselves, and we don't have any guilt. We don't have any envy. We don't have any jealousy. We don't have any hatred. It's like lifting off a sack off of our back that was weighing us down because we were thinking about all these things that were negative things as a result of our karma, the negative results of our karma. So it's a natural law, the spiritual natural law. So don't take my word for it. Don't take the Buddha's word for it, but investigate it yourself. And that's been the invitation of Buddha from the very beginning, was test what I'm telling you. You know, I'm telling you my experience, but you need to be able to bring this into your life and be able to evaluate it and be able to see how it works in your life. Because we all ascribe, you know, these effects, these results, these actions in different ways through the form, sensation, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, the skandhas that we were talking about. We all do it slightly different. So we all have to test this ourselves. So carrying on with this sentence here, it says, one will experience happiness through the accumulation of virtue. By accumulating non-virtue, one will experience the result of suffering. So the virtue is very liberating. It can be subject to attachment. The non-virtue can be liberating when we recognize our aversion to it and how it's controlling us. And when we're able to neutralize the virtue and the non-virtue together on the path, then there is liberation. That is when we're not bound to the results of either of those. It becomes neutralized. So this strict result is a characteristic of karma, cause, and result. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this so far?
Lance, I always enjoy you when you share your wisdom, like, because you speak in ways that are very relatable, like to me, in relation to analogies where you were talking about gravity, and then karma as a spiritual science. That's such a powerful and easily relatable way to talk about it with other people outside of this community. So thank you for that. You always drop these one-liners that really resonate with me, that are analogies. However, they help me bridge conversations when I'm speaking to lay people. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And this can be subject for debate. Does anybody want to bring up an example of where negative karma brought them or somebody else happiness, true and everlasting happiness? Or on the inverse of that, where good karma, where good things were done, good action was taken, but it gave a negative result.
Well, Lance, what I was going to say is, I think sometimes, and this is like in my science as well, behavior analysis, sometimes there's like the start of something and there's a whole bunch of things in between. We call them small behaviors, until then it's finally the final bigger thing, the final consequence or outcome. So there's an antecedent, and then there's not always an obvious immediate impact, right? And so a lot of things can happen. So what feels like, oh, that should have been good or bad, but there's all these complicated contextual things that distract us from maybe that. So I think, going to what you're asking us, I think that's a hard to answer question, because there's so many distractions on the path that are not sometimes immediate.
That's right. And that's part of the observation.
Mm-hmm.
Part of recognizing that. It comes from the maturity and the wisdom to be able to give yourself the time to experience that. You know, so as I'm looking at Mark, and I'm looking at Bernie, and I'm looking at Gary, we're all, very senior citizens, senior people who have tried to, make good things out of bad things for many years. we've rationalized our behavior in many different ways. And now we've come to the time in our life where we realize, you know what, it just doesn't work.
Is that how you feel? Is that how all of you feel? I'm asking that to someone other than you, Lance. The
Okay.
people that you called seniors.
Okay. Bernie, what would you say about that? Your microphone is muted.
What is it we're asking doesn't work? Or
I was asking you if in your lifetime, and you're a senior
Big car-
citizen,
uh,
have you been able to make, the negative work as a happiness for you?
oh no, well, I'll tell you what, because of my personality, I just feel intensely guilty when I do something and I do something I know is wrong and I brood about it forever. So even if I got away with something, it wouldn't be worth it. For me, it's just my personality that I just beat myself up when I do something when I know is wrong. So that's what that's what keeps me on the straight and narrow. It's not a sense of morality; it's my own neurosis.
So maybe that's part of your karma.
That is part of my karma. I'm sure everything is part of my karma.
Yeah. Gary, how about you? Would you speak to that?
Well, what I discovered much too late in life is that that I'm no different from anyone else. We're all the architects in many ways of our own destiny. We don't realize that. Now, things do happen to us that are out of our control. That's part of life. But for the most part, who we are and what we become are as a result of our own designs, our own intentions, and our own misconstructions of what we should do, and some good things that we've done. But usually when I'm in trouble or when things have gone badly, I find that I need to look inward, not outward.
Okay. So that's a result of trying to be selfish and finally coming to the realization, wow, I got to look inward. Is that correct? Is that overstating what you said? Your microphone's muted.
That's correct, but it's also partially true that we all have in the world, we all are presented with models of things which the world tells us, be this and it will be good, or be that and it will be good, and we choose various models, and sometimes we make a lot of bad choices that could be based on bad guidance. It could be based on a lot of other things, and it could be based on innate perverse self-interest. But the fact is that for whatever reason, we make bad choices. And if we make bad choices, then we experience the result of those choices. And that's why I say in most cases, I can point to someone else, but if I'm going to be accurate, there was always something different I could have done.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Does that help clarify things a little bit, Zara?
So Bernie's transparency it made me laugh. I chuckled when he was saying like his own neuroses that like kind of was like a built-in default to keep him like his morality. Like that made me chuckle because I just appreciate the honesty of that comment. I can relate to that, Bernie. There's some times where I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, even though no one's looking, I could get away with this. However, I'm gonna feel like shit if I don't do it. Like with recycling or picking up trash. I'm like, no one's watching. I could drop it and no one will see. But I'm like, but Mother Nature will see and it'll come back and I'll get something on my windshield or something, like a rock will hit my windshield. So thank you, Bernie, for that. And then Gary, I really love what you just said about the paradigms that we're kind of karmically born into. And then some of us, the challenge is getting past that in our lifetime, right? Like we're born into something from our mother and father, and then going through that karmically and energetically. That was very insightful for me. I hadn't thought of it that way. So thank you. And yes, Lance, it is helpful because I think both of them just shared some wisdom from very unique perspectives.
Very good. Thank you. Does anybody else have a comment they'd like to make about the strict result?
I certainly second what some others have said, that I definitely notice the if I'm acting in ways that I can feel good about with the in ethical, moral ways, it brings my mind is in a more peaceful state as a result of that, and my environment tends to be more peaceful, as one might expect, or more rewarding as a result of that. So I definitely think that's true, and I think would be hard to have a good like deep meditation practice without that piece of it. Although I think some people probably do, but with karma more broadly than that, though, it's hard for me to look at it as like a scientific theory in the way that I would think of like science, or because it no, I guess that there is the claim that people can experience it directly, like the Buddha did, that there is a way to verify it experientially in some way. But in the sense that it's not really like a falsifiable theory. I mean, we don't know how much it's useful to even get into this, but it's not really like a falsifiable theory. Like you can't, there's no real there's no evidence anyone could ever point to prove it or not prove it. Because there could always be another way, or it could be happening another life, or it could be due to another life, especially when it comes to like external situations and circumstances where it doesn't seem to me scientific in that sense. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing even, but so I have trouble validating karma in the broader sense beyond what I was saying earlier through logic.
Well, that's the obscuration of wisdom.
Probably. Or maybe not.
Right.
I don't know.
So Matt, I think about stuff like that, and I think in 100 years from now, like we'll have instrumentation to measure karma, like Star Trek. Well, so like think about the cell phone. 100 years ago, people would have thought you were woo woo if you mentioned a cell phone. Like you can pick up and make a call 5 seconds to another country. Our grandparents would have been like, "What?" So like just because it doesn't exist now doesn't mean, like I always think like science at one point was a dream or magic, right? And that those people were pioneers to think these crazy ideas at that time. They were like witches or whatever, crazy people, but then they were just years ahead of what the science would later catch up with. There's always a gap, right? Like in things like research to practice. And I think there's a spiritual gap that we are evolving now. And we're like, I'm so thankful to be alive right now because I think in a human body. I should contextually say that because what we're experiencing right now is, I think, tremendous. What we're going through as a species and culture, we're becoming more spiritual. So I think it will. And ultimately, right now, it's people have to have, I guess, what you call faith or belief, right, in something that like we kind of like know, like someone knew gravity existed. Like, why are we on the ground? But we didn't at that point have the gap or the instrumentation yet to get there, but it was in someone's head, like they know the knowing. But Matt, I think about that sometimes too, and I think about like I know we'll know like in 100 years and have like some kind of cool instruments, but like the spiritual karma is there, like you're on 100 out of a 200 scale or something for your karma. But I chuckle at that sometimes. Like I wonder, like 200 years from now or 500, what we would have evolved to from a spiritual. I don't know. That's me going off.
Thank you. Did anybody else have something they wanted to add to this? Yes, Alex.
Yeah, this conversation reminded me about the chain email that we were sending each other. Well, I mean, in general, in the early days of email, when we didn't have texting and emails was still fun. So, and one of those were about good and bad things. Like there was something happening, and somebody else was telling them, "Oh, wait, don't judge it. Is it good or bad? Just wait and see." and there were like several iterations where a person would be like late for the plane, and wow, and the plane would crash. So, oh, that's good thing that you're late for the plane. And but something that bad happened, and then something good happened, and to me, it kind of helped me reflect on complexity, the this samsara that also always confuses us at every turn. So yeah, I guess there are so many good karmas and bad karmas, and you never know which one is gonna show up, next minute. So yeah, what I'm saying is, trying to answer your question, there may be instances where somebody does terrible thing and then they were like doing great for the rest of their lives, but maybe at the moment of their dying they feel so miserable and so bad that yeah, they may realize, oh, that probably was not worth it. uh,
Okay,
like
well, very
yeah,
good. We got to move on.
yeah.
So yeah, so that's true, and we're going to touch on what you were just talking about in just a moment here, because the next thing is to talk about the increase from the small. So this is the maturation of a big result from a small karma. For example, regarding non-virtuous deeds, it is said that one will experience a kalpa in the hell realms. A kalpa is a very, very, very long period of time in the hell realm for each instant of a negative thought. So that's a provocative statement, but I think something that we can all relate to is you can be a very wealthy person. You can have many accolades. You can have many awards. You can have buildings with your name on it. You can have all kinds of things. But if you go and you were to murder somebody, all that just falls apart. It's like pulling the rug from underneath of your feet. Now, I know that's being tested these days, isn't it? That whole theory there is being tested. But nevertheless, the point is that we can do all kinds of good things, but that we can do one act of very severe negativity, and that can just destroy everything that we had built ahead of time. Those things will not save us. That we will have to feel, we will have to experience the result of that negative act as if we never did anything really big and good. Another point, and I think that Alex was just talking about that, is that someone's on their deathbed, but they confess, their sins or whatever, before they die. And that there is a degree of liberation, there's a degree of freedom, there's a degree of happiness that that person might be experiencing because they got that off of their chest. They spoke the truth when they've been holding the secret all this time. Now, it doesn't relieve them of the karma that they did, and they're going to have to pay for it in some way, but there is a mitigating circumstance there where now you've confessed, you've admitted the truth of what has happened, the negativity, and maybe that is going to help in the process of purification of that negativity. The same thing could happen to the person who is the shooter, who is killing somebody when they have all these things and so on. And maybe, some of that is taken into some kind of consideration, and, other things are involved, what the motivation was, what the circumstances were, what the results were, and so on like that. So there's many other things that come that have to be evaluated. So this increase from the small is something that we need to recognize as part of the natural law of karma. There is Where's my note on that? Oh, here it is. For a karma to be a karma, for an action to be an action, for something like that to happen, what is it? What are the mitigating circumstances? So there's four complete elements, or four elements to complete a karma. One is the motivation, that there has to be a motivation to want to do the good deed or the bad deed. There has to be a motivation to want to kill somebody. There has to be a motivation for somebody to want to save somebody in some way. So there has to be that motivation. The next thing is there has to be an object at which the action, at which the karma is aimed at, an object of the karma. So a person that's going to get killed, or something that is going to help somebody. So maybe it's, it's giving them a job, maybe it's, giving them a house, maybe it's giving them an education, whatever it is, there has to be an object of what motivation is, whether it's a good motivation or a bad motivation. So there has to be that. So there's got to be the subjective of the motivation, the objective of who it's aimed at. Then there has to be that action that is taking place. So there's the killing. There's somebody stabs somebody pushes somebody down the steps, they strangle them, whatever they do to kill them. There has to be that act of killing in a negative situation, or stealing, whatever that negativity might be. It doesn't have to be killing. Or there has to be an action of transferring, the goodness, the money or whatever it is, for somebody to help somebody else. There has to be that. It can't just be, oh, I want to help you, and that's going to be good karma. No, it has to be that you actually do that. You transfer the money, you give them the money, or you buy them the house, or whatever it is. So there has to be that action has to take place. And then the third thing is the completion of the karma. And the completion of the karma, or the completion of the action, is that there is satisfaction. I'm glad I killed them, whatever means you use to kill them. I'm glad I was able to give them this job. I was glad I was able to educate them. I was glad I was able to give them this money. So it's these four elements that constitute a full karma. Now, if any of these elements are missing, then there's a mitigation there. If all of them are present, there's very obvious, powerful, activity that's happening. But if these are missing, if it's just a thought, oh, I want to kill this person, but I actually don't kill this person. Or I'm so angry, I just feel like I could, destroy something. I could go beat up somebody's car or something like that. But it's just a thought. I'm really not going to do it, and so I'm just thinking about it, and I do it, but then immediately after I've got remorse. Oh, I shouldn't have done this. This was terrible. I feel bad. What can I do to redeem myself? What can I do to pay amends for this, and so on? So these four things need to be fully present for a full karmic result, but they can, if any of them are missing in some way, they mitigate the severity of the result. So having said that, then we go back to this increase from the small. So what can be a small gesture can have a great big result. So whether it's a negative gesture or it's a positive gesture, can have a very big result. So that's something to consider about karma. And then the next thing is the inevitability. That means that unless the antidote for a karma appears, the result will come without waste or loss, even through limitless kalpas have passed. So this is the thing that maybe is the most mysterious to us, the thing that we say, well, this isn't scientific, because how can we track something that happened, 5 years ago? But even greater than that, how can we track something that happened a lifetime or two ago? And so I know within myself, I feel that there are certain things that I just don't seem to be able to find an antidote for, and it's something that tends to make me feel like I'm being held back a little bit. But I also take responsibility for that, although I don't know what it is. But I'm working towards being as perfect a person as I can, and maybe in some way or another that fruition is going to come up, and I'm going to be able to recognize it and deal with it. So we may have all these good things happening to us, but yet there's something that's nagging at us. There's this anchor that is just, we're dragging along with us, despite the fact that we got all these good things. So that's an interesting thing. So this has to do with this inevitability, that if you do something good, good things are going to happen. If you do bad things are going to happen, although we may not know what they are, what the causes, excuse me, what the hidden causes of these things are. So it says the result will come without waste or loss, even though limitless kalpas have passed. Karma may lie dormant for a long time, but somehow when it meets the proper conditions, the result will come out. Thus, one will become afraid of the suffering of samsara and gains confidence in karma and result. So it's causes and conditions. We may have the causes deep within ourselves to do bad things, but if the conditions aren't there to allow this to come up, then those causes can remain dormant. But when the conditions are there, then all of a sudden, now it comes to fruition. An example for that might be, well, I keep a gun in the house. And if somebody comes to the house and I feel threatened by them, and I grab the gun and I shoot them. So that was a cause meeting a condition. The gun was there. But if the gun wasn't there, then that cause may be diffused. I may say, oh, well, there's a strange person here. I don't know how to deal with that. I don't have a way. I'm not going to fight them. Let me call the police. Let me ask for some help in some way. Or maybe I try and diffuse the situation myself. So the point is that there has to be cause and there has to be condition. And if there's no cause, you can have 20 guns around. But if you don't have the cause to hurt somebody, to kill somebody, those guns are just going to lay there and not do anything because you don't have the motivation to do that. So both of those things have to be present for that to happen. So this last line, it says, one becomes afraid of the suffering of samsara and gains confidence in karma and result. So here, this is the fear factor. If I don't do this, I'm going to suffer. If on the other hand, if I do this, I'm going to feel much better. So there's a sense of this reciprocity that's in place, a sense of morality that comes about that we develop through this observation, through our experience of what we have tried to get away with over our lifetime, or we've witnessed other people trying to get away with in their lifetimes, and we see that and we apply that natural law to our situation, and we create the boundaries for ourselves, or we create the motivation for goodness and for negativity, for wholesomeness or non-wholesomeness, etc. So let's discuss that for a little bit. Does anybody have any thoughts about this? The increase from the small or the inevitability?
So I do have a question about like the parts of the full sequence of the karma, like the thought, the intention, all those aspects. And I know once a point, like you've said, like what if you run into a deer by accident, right? It wasn't my intention to run into the deer. What happens to that karmically? Does it dissolve? Like it's incomplete. It's an incomplete chain. It's not fully developed. What does that ripen, or does that come back in some way?
Well, it could. It depends on what what the causes are, what those other motivations were, what those other elements of the karma would be. If you hit the deer and it was completely an accident, and then you are making amends for it, and maybe there's things that you can do, maybe in your practice. You can visualize yourself as the deer, or your mother as the deer, and you're truly, regretful, remorseful for that. And you're always going to drive more carefully than you did before, even if it wasn't your fault and the deer ran out and there was nothing you can do. But there's other things that you can do to help you to be at peace with this. Can you totally remove the karma? Do you neutralize the karma? I think that's something that we all have to consider. We all have to motivate. We all have to think about. We all have to contemplate. Maybe Bernie has some wisdom on this.
You're asking me, I really don't know. My feeling is if something happens completely by accident, then it's no karma involved because there was no intent to harm in the first place. But you have to look into the possibility that you weren't being as careful as you could have been. And that might be some karma there, just due to your if you hurt someone or some animal through your carelessness, that could be some karma associated with that. But I imagine it would be a lot lighter than deliberately killing an animal. So, but that's just my opinion. I don't have any official word on that.
No, this is a subject of great debate.
Yeah.
You got monastics together or philosophers, and this is a subject of great debate.
So I guess so here's a question, I guess, then to spin off that, then what Bernie is saying, Lance, and anyone else is like, so because if you're back tracing, like you're talking about the context, like with the gun example, right? Like the conditions after. So like you said, like lifestyle, right? If I'm leading a lifestyle that's driven by my ego and attachment to all these things, and then that causes me to rush, to drive carelessly, like I'm backtracking it and saying, really, maybe it is my karma that I hit the deer because of my lifestyle. I was not paying attention on the phone, texting, because I'm doing too much because of ego. And so
Sure.
I would trace it back and then go inward and say, why were you speeding? Why were you like, that's where I would go with the thought process of, and I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I think it traces back in a systematic way to
Think of it as disease. Think of it as cancer. Why does somebody get cancer?
because of lifestyle choices. Yeah.
Because of lifestyle choices,
Yeah.
and it was their motivation to be born in a particular life, and it may not have had that ingredient of cancer in there, but it was a byproduct. It was a condition of that, the result of that cause, and it's like a byproduct or something like that.
Lance, yesterday you spoke about this, and just go ahead and because I know for time I don't want to take up time. Did you talk about already in the previous weeks? Because I'll go back to the YouTubes on people who choose to come back and be born into a human body. They're not in need of it, like where the ego is grasping, like I can't handle this freedom. Like you talked about it yesterday. Did you already talk about that karmically in the last couple weeks where I missed it?
Well, not directly, not specifically, but
Okay.
that is a point. So when so in our lifetime, we've talked about this when we talked about the 12 links of interdependent origination, and we talked about the 12th link, and there's the person who's carrying the bag of all their karma on their shoulders.
Right.
and now they're going through, their next life, carrying this bag around. So, can we, as we are going through our life, if we can allow that karma to come to fruition, and then we do what's necessary to neutralize it, and then be able to figuratively be able to remove that karma from the bag, eventually that bag's going to become empty. It's going to be, all the karma is going to be gone out of it. So some of us have, the reason why we are born again, why we are reborn as human beings or animals or whatever, is because of prior karma that directed us to move like a leaf in a wind, being blown in the karmic winds. Like we're like a leaf, and the leaf is being blown by our karmic winds to go in this direction or that direction, to have this kind of lifestyle or that kind of lifestyle, and so on. So there is that. And then, so the bodhisattva, sometimes is following in that, but the bodhisattva has more control. An ordinary human being without the Dharma teachings is just like that leaf, but a karmic being is got the vehicle of the Dharma to drive along the pathway, so that they know what the result, or they're moving in the direction of what they want their next life to be. They want it to be for the benefit of the enlightenment of other beings. So this is creating a motivation for ourselves, you see, that is a karmic motivation, so that we may have 3 or 4 or 5 lifetimes, whatever, being a bodhisattva.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. That's really helpful. I wondered, Lance, do you ever contemplate where you are in that process?
I'm somewhere in there.
Okay. All right. I just wondered if anyone else, without there being ego attached, was comfortable talking about upon self-reflection, like, do you see yourself in that way, and do you see yourself as making a conscious choice to come back in, without it being like attached to ego, in this safe conversation between us? Like, do you think about that?
Well, I do, and I've made definite decisions, choices to be a spiritual person. I was a spiritual person before I realized it, or I kind of knew there was something going on, but then I said, this is the pathway that I want to follow, that I need to follow, that comes natural to me, and so on. So there certainly was that. And I think that maybe we all have that, and that's why we're all here right now. I don't think it's unique to me or anybody else, but I think that it does become a choice that we make for a multitude of reasons, that we make that choice. Yes, Alex.
Yeah, thank you for opportunity to share something. Lance probably knows I practiced martial arts for a while, and that actually gave me a lot of pause at some point, thinking about karma and all that. So martial arts is a deadly art. So I mean, it can get you in trouble, it can get other people in trouble. But I was thinking about scenarios where, well, let's say I'm with a sword, and I know how to use sword, and some people come and still trying to rob me, and they know I have a sword and they see it, and they still trying to come and rob me, or maybe somebody, or maybe trying to kill somebody who's next to me. So do I use that sword? Is it their karma that I have the sword and I can prevent something bad from happening? Whose karma is that? Just like Lance was telling, like there's a gun in the house, and somebody comes in the house. Like, whose bad karma it is? Is it your bad karma that you kill somebody because you get scared and shoot the person, or is it bad karma of that person that got into a house that has a gun that can kill them? So I don't know how people come to that resolution. I'm just thinking that this is again a bit of interwoven road, and yeah. So maybe if even if I kill somebody trying to protect the other person, I'm probably gonna still suffer consequence. Somebody will still try to kill me because I killed somebody, but maybe they will not kill me very painfully, as a mitigating circumstance or something like that. Or maybe somebody else will come and rescue me at this point in
Well, this is
time.
this is good conversation, and we could talk all day about these kind of situations and so on. And one of the things that people usually bring up in this conversation is, well, what about the airliner with 200 people on board that has an accident in the air and comes down and all 200 people are killed at one time, or maybe a missile goes and shoots it down or something like that. What about those kinds of situations? What kind of karma is that? Were those people sharing the same karma? Or was it different karmas that all kind of were in the same airplane at the same time? So I don't think there's a definitive answer for this, but it's one that requires a contemplation and a sense of responsibility to not be the person that's causing the death of others, and that I would rather myself be dead. If somebody's coming at me, I'm not going to give my life to, or rather, I would give my life in order not to kill that other person. If he wants to kill me that bad, he's going to do it. But I'm not going to kill him to protect myself in that way. So that's another question. That's whether it's your family, you're protecting your family, because if you kill somebody, even though you're doing it as a defense mechanism, you still have that karma. It may be mitigated through the four elements that we talked about. I may be sorry that I did it, but I still did it.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to add one more twist about the airplane with 200 people on board. We tend to think it's all bad, but it occurred to me that some of these people may be like, well, about to develop a very painful cancer, and the cancer that will cause them a lot of suffering and a lot of pain. And by dying quickly, that actually have liberated them from a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. So I think there are ways to be a little bit open-minded, maybe even for those situations. But I have to agree, I still struggle sometimes, thinking of those ways.
So we always have to think about thank you. We always have to think about the moralistic, right from wrong, that we don't want to be part of that, of killing somebody or harming somebody or stealing from somebody, any of those things. But we have to rely on our practice, and this is why the great Mani mantra, the Om Mani Padme Hum, is so significant and so powerful, because those lights that are being generated by those three syllables, or the symbology of that, going out to all beings to liberate them, to be able to help them, to liberate them. So if that's like our last thought, what would you want your last thought to be? What would you want to tell somebody who's dying? What's the last thing that they should hear? Should it be everything's going to be okay? I'm sorry. I wish this hadn't happened. You want me to take care of your family? Or do we do something transcendent by by generating this energy within ourselves that is symbolized by Om Mani Padme Hum Shri, and that we are transmitting that from our heart to their heart. It purifies us, and hopefully it purifies them. So this is where our practice comes in all of this. Our practice comes in helping us to develop the wisdom to be able to maintain the moral ethics, to keep ourselves out of these dangerous situations, to have the generosity to be able to help each other, and the patience and the diligence and all the different things that we talk about in the paramitas. So we see that it's the spirituality, that all these things, this karma is all activity that's happening as a human being in the 5 skandhas. And the spirituality is what is woven in the 5 skandhas. It's like the fabric that the 5 skandhas are woven in. Okay, so does anybody else have another comment or questions?
Yeah, well, I'd like to make a little bit of a comment on what's been said so far.
Okay.
And that, they talk about the different types of generosity under the perfection of generosity. One of them is the generosity of giving protection to others. So it seems to me that being something like a policeman or even a soldier is not necessarily a bad thing, because you're performing the generosity of giving protection to others.
That's true, and they're willing to sacrifice themselves in many cases in order to give that protection.
Yeah, so yeah, I can't say that always using violence is wrong. It might not always be a problem.
Well, there's the mitigating circumstances.
Yeah.
So again, this is food for meditation. This is what we are developing is a mindfulness of this dynamic that we go through.
Yeah, and real quick, what I was thinking as well is, even just on a maybe more basic level of, if it is the fact, or if one does believe, as I do, that the our attachment to our ego, the ego clinging and self-cherishing, is at the root of what's causing me to suffer, causing us to suffer. That all of the negative karmas or the unwholesome deeds are all things that really reinforce the ego and the separateness of the ego in a very heavy way, while the virtues kind of do the opposite of that, or all the altruistic attitude and behaviors do the opposite of that, and is
Right.
planting those seeds more and more deeply for those things that even that's one way sometimes I think about it too. That seems very true, very obvious to me to be true. Yeah.
Yes. So that's the enrichment, that we're increasing our knowledge, we're increasing, what we experience and so on. And so that's one of the 4 enlightened activities, and if our cause for this is always the benefit of other beings, then, that kind of puts us on the right path. Well, I know we can talk all the rest of the night on this, and it would be fun to do that sometime, But I think, it's better to leave it, in a as pure a state as we can, because when we start talking about it, we start giving out our habitual tendencies, and our rationalizations start coming up, and what if, and what should be, and what could be, and all these kinds of things, and it kind of muddies things up. It kind of shakes up the jar with the mud in it, instead of letting everything settle down. So with all this information, to be able to sit and to meditate on this is really the proper way to do this. we've agitated the glass. We're thinking about all these things. We've given some direction. Now we need to let it happen. Let the meditation, the contemplation happen, and let your own wisdom come up. And then we can have a discussion. Okay. Any closing thoughts or questions? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. And Bernie, you were the umze for this evening. Do you have your prayer book, and can you do the, how did that come up? Can you recite the dedication, lead us in the dedication prayers? Everybody should be, reciting the dedication prayers, all these prayers along with the umze. So he's not just doing it for us, he's leading us. So mute your microphones and please recite along with Bernie.
So this is the dedication prayer by Lord Jigdan Sumgon. I assume that's the one to do.
Oh, that's fine, yes.
Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of Yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. Measures collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara nirvana and the innate root of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me in mind, obstructors who harm, malicious Maras, and hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the powers of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachments to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master, qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such, and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. So you want me to go on and do the Karma prayer, or is that enough?
Oh, that's fine. Om.
Okay. Om. Ah.
Om.
Om. Ah. Om. Om. Ah. Om. May my body, speech, and mind be united with all the Buddhas of the 3 times for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Very good. Thank you all very, very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Bernie. Thanks, Matt.
Sure.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lance.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody, for being here.